Back in 2017, I used to live in Denmark in what they call a study apartment, a compact living space. These places are meant for young folks who want to move out on a tight budget. Getting one was no easy task due to the long wait list, but luck was on my side, and I got approved pretty quickly after signing up. The whole process happened fast, and suddenly I had a space to call mine. The apartment was situated in a somewhat questionable neighborhood, mainly occupied by low-income families on welfare and people with special needs placed there by the government. Despite the neighborhood's reputation, I wasn't too bothered. Having my own place at a young age felt like a big achievement. I could hang out with friends, invite my girlfriend over, and relish in the feeling of independence. During my time there, things were mostly uneventful, except for sporadic encounters with an elderly woman dealing with mental illness. She would often yell and curse at other residents, which was unsettling. It made me cautious whenever I was in the parking lot. I learned that she believed the government was watching her and even wore a bicycle helmet, convinced that aliens were trying to control her mind. A friend whose girlfriend worked with elderly citizens told me all about this. Despite the odd presence of this woman, I never truly felt unsafe in the apartment complex. I stayed alert to my surroundings and always made sure my doors were locked. Before bed, I double-checked my apartment, just in case the elderly lady mistook me for an intruder. But one night, after a late gaming session that ended around 3 a.m., I had just settled into bed and turned off the lights when the doorbell rang out of nowhere. It was so unexpected that I practically leaped out of bed. I sat up, listening carefully in the eerie silence. It was 3 a.m., and I wasn't anticipating any visitors. My front door had wooden frames with covered windows on top and bottom. I had covered these with paper to prevent anyone from peeking inside. Even with the paper, the hallway light cast a shadow of someone standing outside. This sight alarmed me as I approached cautiously. "Can I assist you with something?" I asked, trying to sound composed. "Please let me in. I need your help," came a slurred voice, seemingly intoxicated but also faked. "What do you want? Who are you?" I responded, feeling uneasy. "Please, help me. I need your help. Just let me inside." The voice persisted. "No chance. I don't even know who you are. Do you realize what time it is?" I replied firmly, growing more cautious. "Just let me in. I promise I won't hurt you," the voice pleaded. This just made the situation even creepier. To prepare myself, I grabbed my golf club from behind the door. "Listen, I don't know what you need help with, but you better speak up, or I'm coming out there, and you won't like what happens," I warned, gripping the doorknob tightly. "I'm looking for number 86. Please just let me in," the man insisted. "You're at 64. You're on the wrong floor. Is that what you needed help with?" I clarified. The man suddenly started pounding on my door vigorously. Ready for a confrontation, I held the doorknob, bracing myself. Then the pounding stopped, and the man's phone started vibrating. "Hello." "Okay," he said, addressing me with newfound confidence. He then retraced his steps down the hallway and left. Initially in defensive mode, I now felt puzzled and somewhat uneasy about the whole encounter. I couldn't figure out why someone would send a hitman after me. I didn't have any enemies. Maybe the guy had just ended up at the wrong place, or maybe he was a disturbed individual messing with people in the dead of night. After that incident, I stayed up for another hour, smoking cigarettes and keeping watch in case he returned, but he never did. To this day, I have no idea what that person wanted. The sudden switch from a fake drunk voice to complete sobriety suggests this wasn't a normal situation. and who knocks on a stranger's door at 3 a.m. in the dark. The man's reassurance that he didn't mean any harm only made the encounter more unsettling. If I had opened that door, who knows what could have happened. I'm relieved I chose to keep it shut. The whole experience had an air of shadiness, and I'm happy to report that nothing else of that sort occurred. 2 years later, I finally moved away from that place. A couple of weeks back, I found myself boarding a flight bound for an unfamiliar small town. The purpose of this journey was to secure a place to live before embarking on my grad school journey in the upcoming autumn. Accompanying me on this trip was my boyfriend. Leading up to our departure, I invested significant effort into researching available apartments on Craigslist and coordinating multiple appointments. Our initial meeting was slated for the afternoon, set against the backdrop of a distant residential area. My correspondence with the landlord via email had left a satisfactory impression, and he had requested a confirmation call an hour prior to the meeting. Yet, when I dialed his number, there was no response. Undeterred, my boyfriend and I decided to venture on foot to the designated house, hopeful that the landlord would appear. With roughly 10 minutes remaining before our scheduled rendezvous, the landlord finally reached out. His speech was measured and unhurried, bearing the demeanour of an older individual. I dismissed any peculiarity, attributing it to his age. I confirmed our presence at the house, marking the inception of an unusual sequence of events. Unexpectedly, the landlord's tone shifted to one of intense distress, demanding an explanation for my failure to mention my boyfriend. The thought hadn't crossed my mind to reveal this detail, as my boyfriend wasn't intending to relocate with me. He was merely aiding me in my apartment search. After elucidating this situation to him, the man lapsed into silence before extending an apology. He recounted instances when individuals had omitted their marital status, which had caught him off guard. With that, he swiftly terminated the call, leaving us bewildered. I shared this odd conversation with my boyfriend, who was immediately unsettled. His inclination was to depart the premises, but given the limited housing prospects, we reluctantly opted to remain, hoping this might still be a suitable option. As we deliberated our course of action, we observed a figure exiting the house we were scheduled to inspect. The individual seemed youthful, yet emitted an air of suspicion, casting a brief glance in our direction before hastening away. Although this incident heightened our unease, it wasn't sufficient to trigger an immediate retreat. My boyfriend and I exchanged apprehensive looks, unsure of our next steps. Eventually, the landlord materialized. He bore the appearance of someone in their 50s, possessing a towering and formidable physique. His eyes appeared devoid of emotion, fixated and vacant. Approaching us leisurely, he acknowledged the desire to shake hands, but abstained, citing dirty hands from work. My boyfriend inquired about his occupation, and the landlord provided a curt response. From that juncture onward, he directed his inquiries exclusively toward me, disregarding my boyfriend. Throughout our exchange, his gaze remained unblinkingly locked onto my eyes. I aimed to supply evasive replies, while my boyfriend echoed similar queries to the landlord, who chose to offer no response. Abruptly, the man proposed leading us to the basement. In hindsight, that should have been our cue to exit, yet, for inexplicable reasons, we stayed put. I convinced myself that this was merely an idiosyncratic elderly man from a small town, his demeanour a manifestation of eccentricity. Conversely, my boyfriend's inclination was to flee this increasingly uncomfortable situation. Grudgingly, he followed as the man ushered us towards a detached shed situated at the rear of the property, away from view. Upon opening the shed's door, We were met with a staircase descending into pitch-black darkness. The man fumbled for the light switch, but illumination remained elusive. Ordinarily, one would comment on the lack of light, but the man remained eerily composed. He ventured into the darkness and stood motionless. He casually inquired whether we intended to join him. My boyfriend retorted that there was little to observe without light. The landlord lingered for an extended period before ascending the stairs, wordlessly sealing the basement door behind him. Subsequently, he led us inside the house, marking the onset of increasingly strange and disconcerting occurrences. The front door, our sole avenue of escape, automatically locked upon closure. When my boyfriend sought to manipulate it, the man displayed visible agitation, insisting that he desist. Nonetheless, my boyfriend managed to surreptitiously unlock it. Throughout the tour, the man repeatedly attempted to corral us into confined spaces, often delving into his pockets before retracting his hands upon noticing our scrutiny. Both online and during our face-to-face interaction, the landlord had asserted the presence of a grad student dwelling in the house. Yet, the evidence seemed staged. Neatly arranged generic textbooks adorned the table, but they weren't the typical reading material for someone in their 20s. A bowl of fruit rested on the table, while the fridge, pantry, and utensil drawers stood utterly empty. A scant 3 t-shirts occupied the closet, and the landlord offered no insights into the individual's educational institution or the duration of his tenancy. Lastly, he guided us through every room except one, labeling it as the attic and deeming it unnecessary to view. Upon pressing for explanations, he furnished a variety of excuses, including unfinished renovations, the presence of furniture, or a foul odour emanating from within. The last rationale appeared plausible, as a noxious stench permeated the area near the door. After enduring the progressively uncomfortable encounter, we finally found an opening to excuse ourselves and depart. The man ushered us out and promptly returned to his vehicle. However, once he believed we had turned the corner, he disembarked from his car and leisurely re-entered the house. My boyfriend, driven by suspicion, decided to research the landlord that very night. Our findings revealed 3 unsettling facts. The man was a prominent figure within the community. There was no evidence supporting his ownership or management of any real estate as advertised on Craigslist, and the address he had listed as his residence was identical to the house we had toured. Needless to say, it was the most unsettling experience of my life. This incident unfolded during my early teen years, around 14 or 15, back at my parents' house. Despite the passage of time, I'm now 25, the memory still manages to send shivers down my spine. It was the tail end of my summer break, and my parents decided on a final fishing trip before school resumed. With my mom operating a cafe near the high school, they left me with the usual instructions and mundane details on how to contact them. Opting for my dad's Jeep due to my mom's car being at the repair shop, venturing out was off limits. The absence of adults and the presence of a well-stocked bar, my dad was quite the drinker, created an opportunity for me to relish a weekend home alone. I surrendered to junk food, indulged in B-horror films rented from Netflix. This was during the era of mail-order DVDs, and comfortably settled into my dad's leather recliner downstairs. Saturday night, or technically Sunday morning, found me with a bowl of popcorn, eyes glued to the TV, engrossed in Ring U. To enhance the eerie vibe, I extinguished all lights, enveloping myself in the movie's unsettling atmosphere. Midway through the film, nature beckoned, compelling me to head to the bathroom. Laziness prevailed, and I skipped switching on the lights as I made my way to the bathroom near the front door. Seated on the toilet, my mind ruminating on the plot of Ring U, I inadvertently glanced up at the oval window facing the front yard. My dad had opted for frosted privacy film instead of curtains, allowing vague shapes to be discerned while obstructing full visibility. Amid my thoughts, I noticed something unusual, a figure outside the window, resembling a person standing there. This sight stood out due to the absence of front porch lights. Only a street light cast a shadow. As I processed this, the shadow moved out of sight. It dawned on me that this person had evaded the motion-sensitive lights, a realization that implied they had bypassed them with remarkable skill. The only way to achieve this was to circumvent the house's side and clamber over the banister. Furthermore, the figure had now positioned itself outside our front door. With an awkward slide off the toilet, I hastily adjusted my pants and executed a military-style crawl to the living room. My primary goal was to startle the intruder, who had proven adept at avoiding the porch lights. Also, the absence of cars in the driveway, given the absence of both my dad's Jeep and my mom's car, likely led them to believe the house was unoccupied. I laid low on the floor, ears strained for any indication of movement. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps pacing reached my ears. Fear gripped me, fearing that the person might break in and discover a vulnerable young girl home alone. In a state of panic, I crawled to the kitchen, grabbed a phone, and as I did, the footsteps outside ceased, suggesting the person had left the porch. Glancing at the front door, I noted that the lights hadn't illuminated, implying they had leaped off the side. My attention then turned to a window with raised blinds near the back door, perpetually left uncovered due to our curious cats. Hastily closing the blinds, I positioned myself on the floor. Whether the person had spotted me remained unknown, yet their familiarity with the porch lights suggested they knew about the perpetually raised blinds. The TV's glow hindered my vision during my rush, exacerbating my fear. I sat there, ears attuned to any signs of movement outside, until the porch door began to rattle. My dad had fitted up to the door to let the cats out while preventing their escape, though my mom often forgot to secure it. The door shook because I had locked it the last time I was outside. Engulfed in panic, 3 thoughts raced through my mind. First, this person possessed a knack for bypassing the porch lights. Second, they were aware of the previously exposed window that I had hastily concealed. Third, they knew the porch door was generally unlocked. While a rational person might have dialed the police, I instead called my dad. As I locked the back door, the garage door, and the front door, the phone rang. After some time, my dad answered, his tone a mix of annoyance and concern. I urged him not to panic, but confessed my own distress. Detailing the situation, I questioned why he hadn't contacted the police yet. By now, I was in my parents' room, all lights on, hoping the illuminated space would create the illusion of an adult's presence. My dad instructed me to hang up and call the police while he alerted the neighbors. I darted around the house frantically, like a mad person, switching on every available light. When the police arrived, their search yielded no intruder. However, I was so apprehensive about opening the door for the officer that I demanded identification before letting him in. Only after verifying his identity through a call to the police station did I allow him entry. The neighbors reassured my parents of my safety, but their search found no signs of lurking individuals. Consequently, my parents made their way back home immediately. From that point on, they never left me alone until their return. The subsequent week was haunted by the horror of being alone at home. I resisted opening the blinds for the cats or using the downstairs bathroom. Additionally, Our backyard woods triggered fear of lurking intruders. The most unsettling aspect was that, at week's end, news broke of a woman's house being burglarized, with her being assaulted. Her husband was away on a business trip, and the intruder had entered through the back door. The possibility of what might have transpired had I been asleep, or if the intruder had realized a teenage girl was home alone, sent chills down my spine. I want to preface my account by acknowledging that I may not be the most skilled narrator, but I'll do my utmost to recount the incidents to the best of my memory. During my high school years, I was romantically involved with a young man named Norman. It's been around 12 to 13 years since that time, and I'm now 29 years old with a 9-year-old daughter. Norman and I were each other's first loves, and we even exchanged promise rings, a significant gesture in those days. Like any teenage couple, we spoke about marriage and our shared future. As time went on, our relationship encountered its share of disagreements, leading to a recurring pattern of breaking up and reuniting. My own immaturity played a part, and during one of our separations, I found myself entangled with another guy, creating a messy love triangle. This ultimately led to Norman and I parting ways for good when I opted for the other person. Although not my proudest moment, it's essential to remember that I was just 17 at the time and lacked the perspective I have now. Several years later, I decided to create a Facebook profile and took the opportunity to look up Norman out of curiosity. We reconnected on the platform, and I reached out to apologize for the events that transpired between us. By this point, I was happily married and had recently become a mother. Norman responded graciously, and we maintained a friendly connection through social media. Our interactions mostly consisted of birthday greetings and occasional comments on each other's posts. As the years passed, Norman entered a new relationship with a woman named Marissa. Witnessing his progress in moving forward brought me genuine happiness, even though my own marriage hadn't endured. I focused on raising my daughter independently and finding fulfillment in my life. However, an unexpected turn of events occurred during one Christmas when I stumbled upon an old Polaroid photo of Norman and me taken during our dating days at a cabin. This prompted me to message Norman, reminiscing about the enjoyable times we shared. Sadly, he didn't reply, and later, I realized that I was no longer on his list of friends. Some months later, I was approached by Marissa, who sent a message filled with insults. She had come across the message I had sent to Norman months prior and demanded that I cease all contact with him. Marissa went on to boast about how the charm bracelet he had given me was overshadowed by her own gifts from him. She claimed that our promise rings held no significance, as she now possessed a splendid gold engagement ring adorned with multiple diamonds. I chose not to dignify her with a response to her outrageous claims. Feeling frustrated and upset, I decided to leave Facebook and establish a new profile, only adding close friends and family. However, the harassment persisted. I began receiving friend requests from unknown individuals, which I suspected were orchestrated by Marissa. The first account I inadvertently accepted began sending me abusive messages, laden with insults and predictions about my love life. This caused me to become cautious, refraining from adding anyone I didn't personally know. I found myself perplexed by how Marissa consistently discovered my new accounts. She attempted to connect with me on various platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, and somehow even managed to obtain my phone number. At one point, I received a Snapchat request from a user with the name of one of my Facebook friends, but their profile bore unsettling cursive horror writing on paper. In response, I maintained my stance of blocking and avoiding any form of contact, as I felt powerless in this unsettling situation. Fast forward to this year, when I joined a dating app and encountered an individual named Nate within the first week. His photos appeared fairly average, so I didn't give it much thought. Nate claimed he couldn't use FaceTime due to his Android phone, but suggested we communicate over the phone. Over the next few weeks of text conversations, everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly. Consequently, I agreed to meet up in person, selecting an outdoor cafe as the location to ensure a safe and public environment for our initial encounter. I was excited since it had been quite some time since I'd gone on a date. To my bewilderment, upon arriving at the cafe, I spotted a woman approaching with a smile. It was Marissa. She sat down with a self-satisfied expression and greeted me in a casual tone. She then admitted that she had been posing as Nate all along. At that moment, I was rendered speechless, struggling to comprehend why she had invested so much time and effort into tormenting me. Marissa proceeded to unveil a disturbing series of events. Nearly 6 years prior, when she and Norman had begun their relationship, he had shared details about his past with her, including his time with me. This prompted her to investigate my online presence extensively, scouring my pictures and posts in an attempt to understand what he had seen in me. Upon discovering my message to him, she confronted Norman, prompting him to unfriend me and sever ties as she demanded. Marissa admitted to harboring animosity toward me, accusing me of manipulating emotions and expressing a desire to give me a taste of my own medicine. Marissa revealed that she had fabricated multiple fake accounts to monitor my activities, ensuring that I would remain distant from her and Norman's sphere. Despite residing outside their city, she made a point to visit places I mentioned I would be, ensuring Norman and I would never cross paths. She even managed to locate my workplace through LinkedIn. Moreover, she enlisted an accomplice to impersonate Nate during our phone conversations. The most unsettling aspect was her fixation on my daughter. She believed that my daughter bore resemblances to Norman and became fixated on the notion that I had secretly given birth to his child. Marissa warned me against entertaining the idea of revealing this to Norman to reignite our connection, asserting that she alone would bear his child. Needless to say, I was utterly horrified. I rose from the table and instructed Marissa to cease all contact with me. I sat in my car in a state of shock for a while, attempting to process the surreal events that had unfolded. My immediate course of action was to contact my daughter's school, notifying them about the potential for unauthorized individuals attempting to pick her up. Subsequently, I reached out to my brother, confiding in him about the entire ordeal. He advised involving the authorities, although the police were limited in their ability to assist without concrete evidence of Marissa's actions. As of now, 2 months have elapsed without any communication from her. My brother believes that Marissa may have achieved her objective of solidifying her position as Norman's sole focus and might consequently leave me alone. Despite this, I continue to grapple with intense paranoia concerning my online activities and her potential presence. I've informed my family and close friends about the situation, cautioning them against accepting friend requests from unfamiliar profiles. Additionally, I've shared Marissa's photo with my neighbors, asking them to notify the police if they spot her near my residence. I wouldn't put it past her to have obtained my address and attempt to invade my privacy by surveilling through windows. As a preventive measure, I've taken steps to change all the locks in my home. During the previous summer, a peculiar incident transpired on a journey to Bournemouth alongside my brother, his girlfriend, and a few of her companions. Bournemouth, a charming coastal town on the southern shores of England, was a delightful choice for a vacation. However, as crowds gather, the potential to encounter dubious individuals also rises. As we walked together through the park, my brother's girlfriend proposed a visit to the shopping centre with her friends. My brother, who I'll refer to as John, and I found ourselves uninterested, opting to join them later. Feeling fatigued by the bustling throng, John and I sought a moment of tranquility before reuniting with his girlfriend. We decided to seek solace in a nearby forest, where privacy could be relished. Upon arrival, an unexpected wave of unease washed over me. Transitioning from a lively street to a secluded forest amplified my apprehension. The sensation that we were being observed lingered persistently. Those dubious characters I mentioned earlier might have also been present. It struck me that they could even consider this place their abode. Despite my gut instincts advising caution, I imprudently brushed off the unease. John and I proceeded to scout for a suitable spot to unwind and smoke. However, relishing the experience proved challenging as the earlier unease persisted, and much to my dismay, intensified after our session. Out of my peripheral vision, I suddenly glimpsed a figure maneuvering through the trees, gradually drawing closer. John also spotted it. As it approached, we discerned a tall, undernourished man in his 40s, with long, unkempt hair and gaps in his teeth. We promptly recognized him as a drug addict, a tweaker. He hollered in our direction, inquiring about nearby drugs. John and I exchanged puzzled looks and replied, "No apologies, we haven't come across any drugs here." The man then shouted something and swiftly moved in the opposite direction. "Well, that was peculiar. Just your typical crackhead," John commented with a touch of jest. However, I wasn't in a light-hearted state. My paranoia intensified as I grasped the reality that we weren't alone, wondering how many more individuals might be lurking nearby. Shortly after, our suspicions were validated when an older man, seemingly in the grip of addiction, pedaled up to us on a bicycle. He mumbled through his remaining teeth, struggling to articulate. He inquired if we were present for the big thing. John promptly responded, his voice steady and composed, "No, not this time." I sensed that my brother was experiencing the same tension as me. The man on the bike shrugged and began to ride away, but suddenly halted, placing his foot down. He turned around, fixing his gaze intently upon us, as though we were intruders in his territory. Amidst this disconcerting encounter, I heard the sound of twigs snapping from various directions. I glanced over and witnessed more tweakers emerging from the forest, their tattered attire, bloodshot eyes, and unsteady gaits resembling a horde of zombies. Without a word exchanged, John and I instinctively fled in the direction we came from. My heart raced, adrenaline surged. Though it felt like an eternity, the ordeal likely lasted only about 10 minutes. Eventually, we reached the park entrance. Even so, my fears weren't assuaged as echoes of footsteps seemed to persist behind us. Abruptly, John turned and exclaimed, "Oh damn!" I dropped my joint. He stepped a few paces back, rummaging through the leaves in a frantic manner, seeming unhinged. "Leave it. We need to escape before they catch up," I urged, trying to restore calm. "Just give me a second, man." "Relax," he responded, crouching down and sifting through the foliage, his actions mirroring those of an unsettled individual. Overwhelming terror gripped me as I looked up. Figures emerged from the tree line in the distance, and I could swear I heard enraged moans as they staggered toward us. Forget the joint? I don't want to become their meal. Zombies, man. They're coming for us. I exclaimed, fully aware of the irrationality of my words. Yet, at that moment, I genuinely believed we were pursued by an undead horde. Nothing could convince me otherwise. Without awaiting a response, I grabbed John and pulled him to his feet. Miraculously, we escaped unharmed, without any bites or scratches from the tweaker zombies. Their pursuit ceased at the park entrance, gradually fading back into the woods. We stayed in the park, eventually reuniting with John's girlfriend. We recounted the terrifying experience, hoping for empathy. However, she found the tale amusing. While we can now laugh about it, my brother and I still carry the emotional aftermath of that harrowing incident. I often pondered the intentions of those addicts and questioned their presence alongside us. My best assumption is that we inadvertently stumbled into a significant drug transaction. Perhaps the initial man we encountered was the dealer, and our unintended disruption made the tweaker zombies think we were rival suppliers. Or perhaps it was something entirely different. I leave it to readers' imagination. One certainty remains. I will never again venture into unfamiliar terrain, especially while under the influence. There's always a reason to exercise caution.